It is Tuesday, June 25th, 2024, Football Today. I'm so excited because we're finally reunited for the first time, and it feels like about 6 months. Justin Penik, Bobby Skinner, Chris Rose, producer Mikey's here, kind of in spirit. Skinner, I haven't seen you in weeks. I thought you were
Yeah,
going to
you're
leave
back from your
us.
hiatus, so it's good to see you back on the show. Hope all is well.
I was supposed to be on last week for the quarterback show. I did. This is the worst thing. I did all the homework and everything, and we were shooting floorball 3, and I literally could not talk after the last game that day. So I don't think it would have been a great listen.
Bobby?
I think it would have been a fine listen. What was? Did you have any takes or anything with our list you disagreed with?
I got to be honest with you. I've been stuck under a floorball mat.
Well, Bobby,
For,
you're supposed to ask who won. That's
Yeah,
a good thing.
who won the floorball thing?
You'll see later. I can only tell you this. It is worth watching virtually every game. I've never seen a tournament in the history of that warehouse that went the way this one did. And we had 10 rookies. We had people that we just didn't know, and we reach out to them. The group, particularly the ladies that joined us, because there were so many collegiate hockey players that were there.
Mhm.
Incredible.
Yeah, it was very
Really,
good.
really good. Very good group. So I have to go back and watch the quarterback show. I haven't watched it yet. Dude,
Justin ranked Jared Goff 17th. What a piece of shit, huh?
What are you doing, Penik?
I felt bad. When I did it, I felt bad. And the only amendment I would have made, one actually doing it, is, we did it by tiers. I would have moved him up 1, so up to 16th, and instead of putting him in decent, I would have put him in good. That's the only regret that I have.
You know what? So originally the show was supposed to be ranking teams' quarterbacks situations for the next 5 years, which is very different than ranking quarterback. Are we still going to try and do that, or Skinner kind of put the kibosh on that?
That conversation would drive me insane because it'd be so much quarterback contract talk. What if Bryce Young turns? I couldn't put myself through that because it'd be so hypothetical.
Isn't that the fun part?
No, that's the part that drives me crazy. Let's talk about this year, these quarterbacks here and the now. Not like,
Okay.
Is the Jared Goff situation better than the Anthony Richardson situation? Because he could be great, and it's too many what ifs and too much contract talk too. I'm so tired of. There needs to get rid of the salary cap because I'm so tired of having to. Like, a good quarterback gets signed. It's like, yeah, but that takes up a big... It's like, it sucks that we have to have that conversation when good players get signed. Good players should get signed, especially quarterbacks, most important position in football.
Oh, I agree with you there. I mean, of course they should get signed.
Or get rid of the rookie wage scale.
But hasn't your impression of Patrick Mahomes changed significantly with the fact that he's won 2 Super Bowls since getting rid of Tyreek Hill? Like, doesn't that give him extra bonus points?
Sure, but I thought he was like on his way to GOAT status before then too. Like when you watched him, you're like, oh, this is not exaggerating when you're saying he could be one of the best of all time.
Okay.
And if he won these last 2 Super Bowls with Tyreek Hill, we're not talking about but he did it with Tyreek Hill. Good quarterbacks need good players too.
I know, but the fact that he's done it without Tyreek Hill because they've had to make some decisions financially, to me, makes it more impressive. You don't care.
No, it does.
Yeah, that's right, Penik.
I think everybody's right here.
Okay.
No one. Let's go ahead.
We're breaking down our last division. I know we've tried to keep pushing it away. I think we were going to try and break down the AFC South in late October, but we have to do it now here in late June instead. I don't even know where we had the highest team ranked in this.
Did we all have the Falcons the highest on this?
I think so. Remember,
Yeah,
we did it pre-draft, and I had Tampa Bay like at a decent level, and you guys are like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh my god, what am I doing?"
So I actually have it right here. So we're doing the NFC South.
Yeah, NFC South.
And pre-draft, the average ranking for all these teams, we had the Falcons 15.3, the Bucks, and this is we're going off power rankings here. Our 2 power ranking shows. Falcons 15.3, the Bucks 18.3. The Panthers last 31.7, and then the Saints 24.7. All 4 teams dropped post-draft. where the Falcons in our post-draft power rankings were 18.7. The Bucks fell down to 21. The Panthers, we all had them at 32. And then the Saints, 26.3. And it all adds up to the NFC South being the worst division in football per our average power rankings.
Is there somewhere where we could be off base in terms of the interest level of this division? Like, that makes it sound like, oh my God, like I can't watch, 3/4 of the teams that are playing in this division. Or are we wrong on this, Bobby?
No, I mean, I do think it's it's probably it's the worst division going into the season, but the Falcons can make some noise now that they've added Kirk Cousins. And like I think the Saints' defense was pretty damn good last year. It just like the Saints had the same record as the Bucks, who won a playoff game last year, right? Like the Bucks are coming off of this high of making the playoffs, winning a playoff game, but the Saints went 9-8 just as well as they did, and that was with an atrocious offensive line. Like Derek Carr, even though he wasn't like god awful, like not living up to the expectations that New Orleans had for him, so like, and they added Kool-Aid. I don't know. I think the Saints can go 9-8 this year, and then maybe that they end up being a playoff team.
All right. Well, we'll get to the Saints momentarily. Let's start in order of finish, and it is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers who won the division, and then really I thought played a very, very good. They won a playoff game at home. They go up to Detroit. They gave the Lions all they could handle, and Baker, had a bad turnover in the last couple minutes, and that's what prevented them from moving on to the NFC title game. But they weren't that far from playing for the NFC Championship. So do we feel like where are we on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Justin Penik?
I'm simply concerned and worried that Baker Mayfield isn't going to be the same now that his offensive coordinator left from last year. That's where I'm at, where, so what I tried to find, like, all right, let's find some sort of like statistical evidence that maybe Baker can continue it, in which he very much can. He played really well last year, almost threw for 30 touchdown passes, which really there wasn't a lot of quarterbacks that threw for over 30 touchdown passes last year, and Baker was one of them to almost get there. So his CPOE was almost at 0. So what that tells me is that usually when quarterbacks have a really positive CPOE, completion percentage over expected, wow, look at this quarterback. So accurate that he's completing passes that he's not even expected to complete per next gen data. Or if you have a quarterback that's in the negative, oh man, this quarterback isn't even completing passes that he's expected to complete. So Baker was right at 0. Wasn't like he was like, going to like that 2, 3, 4 range where you see, the best quarterbacks are at every single year. So he was 0. So that means it was perfectly average and perfectly fine. That's what I'm worried about. And when Baker loses the offense coordinator that kind of kind of gave him a resurgence of his career, I'm worried that the efficiency is not going to be the same.
I just think the Bucs are in line for regression in general. I mean, they were 1-6 versus playoff teams in the regular season last year, with the only win coming against the Green Bay Packers. They did lose Dave Canales, and Liam Cohen, he comes, went from Kentucky to the Rams, back to Kentucky, and now he's back in the NFL with the Bucs. Comes kind of like a bit from that Rams situation where they like to do play action, and that's where Baker's at his worst, right? Like I found like there's only 2 quarterbacks who had worse passer rating in play action than last year, Mac Jones and Sam Howell. He's just not good in play action. And it's just like the defense to me overachieve, right? Like 7th in scoring defense, but they were 29th in passing. Now they stopped the run. Todd Bowles' defense has always stopped the run. I just think they're a team that's due for regression. And we've seen Baker with him, right? You know him more than any of us, Rose. Mm-hmm. He's an up and down guy, right? And it's maybe the only quarterback in the NFL where you can use like this sports radio take of like you kind of need him to be me against the world motivated, to for him to be at his best. And is he going to be that coming off of his contract? So like they've made upgrades in some certain positions, and I want to break it all down. I just think they're a team that's due for regression, right? Like Bengals, Jags, Dolphins, first 3 games of the year. Or sorry, that's preseason. I'm an idiot. But you have like the Commanders, Lions, Broncos, and Eagle. You know what? My point. That was stupid. They just seem like a team that's due for due for regression, right? I know they won the playoff game, but they were 1-5 versus playoff teams last year.
So here's the thing.
They had the same record as the Saints last year, right? In the same division. Is anyone talking about how the Saints are on the way up and Derek Carr had 25 touchdowns and 8 interceptions? Like the Saints defense was better than theirs. It's just they were better on offense, obviously, with Baker and Mike Evans and crew.
Thing about Baker, and I thought he played pretty well last year. It's not like, okay, so he got this deal. It's not an enormous deal. It's much more, it feels like, of a Daniel Jones deal than anything else, where they could get out after a couple of years if they need to. And you are correct. He's way better when he has to prove people wrong than when people expect something from him. But I don't think anybody expects shit from him. Like his down years in Cleveland, 2019, right? After his rookie year where he set the touchdown passing record, and then they trade for Odell, and everybody's like, damn, this is going to be fun. Well, what happened? He shits the bed. Doesn't do it. 2020, new coach, make the playoffs. Next year, injured early. Fighting the team over it. Trying to show everybody that I can play with a bad shoulder. Horrible. But there's not one person, if you walk up to 100 NFL fans, you're like, what are your expectations of Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Nobody's going to be like, yo, they could be a Final 8 team again. I totally see it. Not one fan is going to say that. So I still think that this is the year where Baker still has shit to prove. And I think that's a good thing for Tampa Bay.
It's a lot different coming off of, the Panthers and Rams year than, again, last year getting the contract. Like in Tampa Bay, they're probably pretty high on him. So I just think they're a team that's due for regression. The division is better now that Kirk Cousins is in it. But that being said, like, I do think there's like some areas of like their offensive line to me could make a huge stride this year, right? You have Tristan Wirfs, one of the best left tackles in the game. You drafted Graham Barton at center. Mm-hmm. Cody Mock is going to be in year 2. Didn't have a good rookie year, but go to year 2. You upgrade over Aaron Stinney with Ben Bredesen. Godecki's been a halfway decent right tackle for them. And, it's just they got to get that running game going, though.
So why can't they run the football? Why can they
like,
not run the football?
Because their offensive line was awful last year outside of Tristan.
But this has been several years now.
It's going back to Brady, yeah.
Yeah, it just why can they not commit to the running game and get that shit? I mean, if anything, like if we want to limit Baker's the shine on him in terms of making sure that he doesn't have to make every play, let's fucking go get a running game. Like, wasn't Rachaad White supposed to be this guy who was supposed to take him to another level?
And they gave him a lot of volume too. Like it's not like they're a team that just abandons the run. Rachaad White
try to commit to it.
Like Rachaad White was like top 10 in scrimmage yards this past year. So he gets a lot of volume. It's just that they weren't, that offensive line was really bad for them. So that's where I'm like their offensive line could make huge strides. And then the wide receiver room, like you have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, who continues to produce. You add Sterling Shepard to that room, right? Like kind of just a reliable, like I think Sterling Shepard, he's not going to have the same production, but can have like a similar role to Adam Thielen had with the Carolina Panthers, where he looks, Thielen looked totally washed in Minnesota. And he has lost a bit, but he's like fits into that slot, going to run that quick game, be like a solid route runner for you. I think Shepard could be like that security blanket for them, even though Godwin's going to get his fair share slot. Godwin works both inside and out. But I think that can help. So I think offensively there can be improvement. It's just defense. I worry that they overachieved last year, and that secondary is going to get them in trouble this next year.
Is Kalijah Kancey going to break out and be a stud?
Yeah, so now they're going to get pass rush, right? That's what Todd Bowles does, right? He has the 3rd highest blitz rate last year. One of the 2 guys that was ahead of him, Wink Martindale's out of the NFL, so he'll be 2nd in blitz rate to Brian Flores and the Vikings. 7th in sacks. So you've got some nice Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey. Like that could be a dominant defensive tackle group. Their edge guys, Yaya Diaby in year 2. It's just their corners really, really worry me. Like I like their safety room of Winfield and Whitehead, But they gave up big plays last year. Gave the second most air yards in the NFL, and you lost Carlton Davis. Now you have Jamel Dean and Zion McCollum, and then either maybe Bryce Hall gets healthy, and gets back to his 2021 form, and then Christian Izina, UDFA last year, started at nickel for them, who I thought did a solid job, helps in the run game and stuff. But their secondary is a huge worry for me.
Yeah, it's going to be. I mean, tops, they're looking at 9 wins. Their probably low point is 7, maybe 6 if it's a horrible year. Let's move on to another team that went 9-8, shall we? The New Orleans Saints. Can we start with, I want Bobby's opinion on this, because Penik and I right away felt like, and you mentioned this at the top of the show, that the Saints were the most boring team in the NFL. You don't find them boring?
No, I find them boring, but that defense was boringly good last year. Like, they were 8th in scoring, 5th in EPA per play, and like all the advanced metrics, they were really good. And I think they got better, right? You add Kool-Aid McKinstry to it. You add Willie Gay to go there with Demario Davis at linebacker. Like, they were a really good run defense, or a really good defense all around last year. Like success rate. They were 6th in passing, 3rd in rushing. And Paulson Adebo's a year older. Marshawn Lattimore's still really good. Alontae Taylor, like, does Kool-Aid, take some of his reps away. You got Honey Badger, and you got other guys like Brian Brzee. I think he's in line for a year or two jump their first rounder a couple years ago to go with Cam Jordan and Carl Grant. So they just have to me, they're going to have a top 10 defense again. Like, there's no reason that this team doesn't have a top 10 defense. It's just the offense has some pretty big question marks. Namely, the offensive line. The offensive line is brutal, despite the fact that they drafted Telis Fuaga.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, you think how Fuaga? How much can Fuaga help that offensive line even just from year one?
I think he might struggle year one. So I think the offensive line is still going to be, even if Fuaga is dominant, that offensive line to me is still going to be really bad unless Ryan Ramczyk, has a miracle healthy season this year. But I mean, they're we talk about the Bucks' bad running game. The Saints were, they were awful too. They were second worst in yards per carry. It'll be interesting to see if Clint Kubiak coming over can implement some of that run game that he, did, his father and him have, done so well. They just offensively, it's like that offensive line is awful. And they need someone to step up in the passing game outside of Chris Olave. Like, Rashid Shaheed should not be your number 2. Like, he's a nice player, but he shouldn't be your number 2 receiving threat.
Don't do that to Rashid Shaheed. That's my dude.
Yeah, I mean, again, I like Rashid Shaheed, but he's, he can't be like your second best passing option when you have no running game, right? Despite the fact that they have Alvin Kamara. It's just that offense last year was Chris Olave or bust. And then like 8 A.T. Perry deep plays at the end of the season.
How the hell did the Saints score 402 points last year? They had like almost 80 more points than anybody else scored in the division.
Yeah, they were middle. They were like a middle of the pack offense. Like Derek Carr certainly wasn't good for him, but it's not like the bottom fell out on him either. Like he was his normal Derek Carr self. It's just he left some Chris Olave. He left a lot of Chris Olave yards on the field. Like Chris Olave, you look at his numbers, like, oh, really good. Derek Carr probably left like 300 yards on the field that Chris Olave could have had. So they need Carr to just be more consistent. And if there's any quarterback who the pressure really messes with, it's Derek Carr. And that offensive line gave him a lot of pressure.
Well, they had 3 really high-scoring games, is what it was. They won 34-0 at New England. They dropped 38 in a win at Indianapolis. And then the last game of the season, I forgot about this, where they just crushed Atlanta. They dropped 48 on them. So there you go. The rest of the time, you guys know I do those 2 shows on Sundays. The first one's strictly a highlight show. And I felt like I showed as many highlights of Derek Carr bitching out receivers for something that went wrong as I did touchdown passes of his. Like it just didn't felt like year one was all over the place for him down there. And we can agree this is it for him, right? This is not they can get out of the contract after this year, I think. This is it. He's not the future down there.
I think this is it for Dennis Allen too.
Me too. I feel that way.
Are they going to fire him if they go 9-8?
That's what I asked
Carr's
Rose.
best stretch of football was the last 5 games of the year. Like it was pretty bad until then, and then they went 4-1 to end the season, and that's when Carr was at his best.
I think it honestly depends on ownership because Rose and I, Rose, we talked about this when we were having our, the Saints are the most boring team in the NFL discussion, where we basically came to the agreement of, even if they win 7, 8, 9 is when you're above 500, I guess it's tough. But even if you're at that 7 to 8 range, the Saints maybe should fire Dennis Allen, but also it depends on that ownership group. Where I know the Saints ownership group, I know they have interests that are. I know they own like a bunch of sports teams, and I know they're an interesting ownership group where maybe they won't have the impatience of. Maybe they have the patience of mediocrity and willing to just keep things going. Oh, we'll win 8-9 games every year. People will come to people will come to our games. And
I mean, do you think Dennis Allen has done an awful job with that roster? Like the defense is good. He's a defensive coach, and the offense, they've done a bad job roster building on that offense. And even like they traded a pick away to go up and get like their best player and Chris Olave. Kamara, it's towards the end of the run there with him. And then going and giving Derek Carr this big contract. I think Dennis Allen's done a pretty solid job with New Orleans. It's just the offense has a bad offensive line, and it doesn't have the talent doesn't have the quarterback or the weapons to make up for it.
If we were having a coaching draft, which I think we should do a show on that, perhaps, when does Dennis Allen get picked?
I see. I don't even think that's fair, though.
Why?
Put him if he's the Bills head coach. Do you think is there any reason why to believe that Dennis Allen is a worse head coach than Sean McDermott?
Maybe slightly less.
Right. Sean McDermott has a better resume, but Sean McDermott also has Josh Allen as his quarterback, right? And again, that's not a knock at McDermott. It's more of like a credit to Dennis Allen for in past years they were banged up. Like I don't know. Like I think Dennis Allen, if you're starting new with Dennis Allen, it's because you got a quarterback and you want a young offensive coach to go with him or something, right? Like again, he's a defensive coach. That defense was really good last year, and it's in line to be really good again.
Yeah, I always think it comes down when you're talking about defensive coaches. It comes down.
And he fired the offensive coordinator last year, brought in Clint Kubiak. I like the action on that. Like Kubiak can get a little more out of this offense. But again, like what do you want with an offense that has Derek Carr at quarterback, a horrible offensive line, and then a bad run game and Chris Olave? Then they were middle of the pack and everything, and every passing category.
Right, but and that's why I feel like we're at this point with the Saints, with just saying that they are just a middle of the pack team. So what is the ceiling? What even is the ceiling with Dennis Allen, with Derek Carr, with this team right now?
And I think that's the front office to blame for the way that they've handled caps, the salary cap and the draft, where they trade up for position players, where they push
think that they're the
cap
Eagles.
and push cap and push cap. And while they're a team that doesn't have a quarterback since Drew Brees left. Like it made sense to do that when you had Drew Brees. Now it doesn't. It didn't. It never made sense for them to try and go all in with Derek Carr. Like that should have been their way of helping getting the cap in a better situation.
Yeah, they just feel like a team that's just stuck in the middle with you, rocking a hard place.
I agree. I just don't think it's Dennis Allen's fault. I think it's the front office.
Right, but I think we also see head coaches that we see coaches all the time that get fired due to like circumstances that are kind of out of their own control.
Sure, I'm just saying I don't agree with it. I think, and now I could change my mind based on what happens this year. but he's a defensive coach who's, they've gotten talent, they've gotten young talent, they've developed it well, and offensively they just have not had the talent.
I always just go back to
they've had to deal with.
And this is just a personal bias. I always just go back to, and the more that I do this show, the more that I'm learning about myself and I guess my own actual takes and preferences on things. I just don't believe in hiring a defensive coach anymore, because that's what it comes down to for me. Whether it's like,
that's
can you
a
get
different discussion?
Right. Can you get a good offensive coordinator? Is the question that I ask whenever there is a defensive coach that is at the helm.
All right,
that's the question that I always ask.
Let's move on to a team that did hire a defensive coach, Raheem Morris, back in the lead chair, this time with the Atlanta Falcons. Obviously, the big deal is what has transpired at quarterback, with first giving Kirk Cousins, a gazillion dollars, and then drafting Michael Penix with the 8th overall pick, just so that they can start looking ahead for when Kirk Cousins isn't around, even though they gave him a 4-year deal and certainly 2+ of it guaranteed for $100 million. So now that Kirk Cousins is here and in his mid-30s and coming off an Achilles, is there the possibility, Bobby Skinner, that we're talking about the Falcons this year competing with the likes of San Francisco, Detroit, Philadelphia, and maybe Dallas, if you want to throw them in there, and Green Bay?
I don't think they have the defensive talent to compete with those teams. Even though, again, they weren't a bad defense last year, but they just don't have they need to figure out a way to create more negative plays, which we'll talk about. But offensively, they should be rolling, right? You got a good offensive line. They kept the offensive line coach, which I think was a key move for them. Even though, they got rid of Arthur Smith. And I mean, this offense was this offense was held back by quarterback play so much last year. I mean, that was a big theme of this show early on. Was man, it's so frustrating that Desmond Ridder is a quarterback for the Falcons with all the talent that they have, right? Kyle Pitts has been a fantasy football bust. He hasn't been a bust in the NFL. He's really good. He had 1,000 yards as a rookie, and been productive. Drake London, right, had 900 yards last year after 850 yards as a rookie with bad QB play. I'm expecting London to get 1,000 yards this year. And then you have the ultimate, maybe my favorite offensive player in the NFL, Bijan Robinson. 6th in running back scrimmage yards as a rookie, top 10 in the NFL. 37 running backs with 850 scrimmage yards. Only Christian McCaffrey, James Cook, and Jalen Warren had more yards per touch than him. He's amazing. So you have a good offensive line, good offensive weapons. You add a speed threat in Darnell Mooney. Gives Zach Robinson, the OC, a little toy, and Rondale Moore. And now you add a good quarterback in Kirk Cousins. This offense should be humming, and especially in a bad division. If anything less than a division title is the complete failure for Atlanta this year.
They also have the easiest schedule in the NFL. I think they have the Eagles and the Chiefs pretty early on in the year, within the first 3 weeks of the season, and they open against Pittsburgh. So the first 3 weeks are some tougher teams there. But after that, and because they play in the NFC South, because they play these other teams twice a year, I think it inevitably just gets so much easier. That's where I think the defense could look better. And that's where maybe they could force some negative plays, because if you have some quarterbacks that hold on to the ball, if you have some quarterbacks that are willing to throw interceptions, that's where guys like Jesse Bates and AJ Terrell can do some damage, right? So that's where I think this defense could look better. The question that I go to, just big picture with this team, is the biggest upside for this Atlanta Falcons team, because obviously you want to compete and you want to win a Super Bowl, right? That's obviously the biggest goal. But I ultimately think the most realistic thing, and Rose, I'll throw it to you with this. I think it's ensuring that Terry Fontenot is the right GM for this team, and this coach and this staff is the right one to lead the Falcons. And if Kirk Cousins does enough and finds enough success where Zach Robinson can maybe even get a head coaching job, ideally Zach Robinson, if the Falcons have a really good year, then Zach Robinson's going to eventually get a head coaching job himself. Can Raheem Morris kind of weather the storm, find that other offensive play caller to kind of take over for him and keep the team afloat, while also saying that, hey, the coach and this GM is the right combo to lead this team? That's what I think is measuring success for the Falcons. That's what I think it is, outside of obviously you want to compete and win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, but you're not going to get that answer after just 1 year.
No, you're not. You're not.
But I will say this. I actually like the Raheem Morris hire. I like it a lot. I think that, and some people say, well, it's an offensive league, and you just brought up the point that you're leaning that you're against defensive coaches.
Right.
I understand all that. But this is a team that needed massive help on the defensive side of the football. I think
it's due to talent.
Oh, I agree with that. But there are a lot of people that think Raheem Morris can come in and, even with a lack of talent, cover up some issues. They really think that he can scheme it out of trouble.
I hope so, because I think Dean Pease was a pretty damn good defensive coach. Like, their run defense was amazing last year, right? And I don't know why, but Caden Ellis and Nate Landman are like one of the best linebacker duos in the NFL, and nobody talks about them. Like, Ellis is one of the more underrated players. He got a halfway decent contract. Nate Landman was number 2 in run stop rate after JOK last year, right? Like, and they're both smart. They both play aggressive. They don't miss tackles. Is Raheem Morris gonna, put them in those same situations? But they were number 1 in EPA per play in run defense last year. Their issue as a defense is that they didn't get negative plays. Like, they were 21st in sacks, and they lost their 2 best pass rushers in Calais Campbell and Bud Dupree. They lost a third of their sack production, and they didn't replace it with anybody. I know they got Ruke Ahoroho and Brandon Dorless.
Hold on, that is Rook Arororo.
Arororo.
Yes.
But they lost
There's
a
no
third
way
of their
that's how you pronounce it.
That is Rook Arororo.
Arororo. And, Grady Jarrett's their best guy in that front, coming off of a torn ACL at 31 years old. Again, that's why the Michael Penix thing is so. It's like you could have had edge 1 in this draft, right? Like, we mock edge to them every single time. Maybe Arnold Ebiketie can take a step in year 3.
No.
And then they had 8 interceptions last year, which was bad, right? It was 30th in the NFL. Jesse Bates had 6 of the 8, right? AJ Terrell is a good cornerback 1, but secondary-wise, outside of Jesse Bates and AJ Terrell, it's a mess. And they don't have the they already weren't a very good pass rush team, and they lost their best 2 guys in Calais Campbell and Bud Dupree.
Well, I feel like their pass rush has been non-existent since Vic Beasley had a good year. Really, it feels like it's been 6 or 7 years since we're like, oh yeah, the Falcons, boy, they can really get after the passer. No, I'm not necessarily buying the whole Raheem Morris. I'm telling you what people in the NFL think, that he can smooth over the rough edges defensively, and that they can get. I think with this offense, if they can hold a team to 24 or 25 points per game, don't you think the Falcons, particularly with this schedule, as Justin pointed out, that they're going to be okay?
Oh, yeah. I think anything less than an NFC South title is a failure for them.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay.
I mean, there's no reason with that offense they shouldn't be better than the Bucs or the Saints. And, I think the defense can be, like you said, Band-Aid together with some of the talent and, be league average or so. I'll be really interested to see, with the defensive coordinator change, do Caden Ellis and Nate Landman and that defensive front, do they stop the run as well as they did last year? So it's just the back end and the lack of pass rush worried me.
And I will bring up David Onyemata, who's a really
good player for them.
Yeah, I mean they have him listed at nose tackle. He had a really 5 sacks, but then he's even hit the quarterback at a much higher rate than that as well. And it seems like he's a good run defender too. So yeah, I'm excited, man. I'm really excited. Fantasy football offense, like Bobby said. Bobby, I want to. We've been talking so much about the quarterback situation. You touched on Bijan kind of at the start, but he was 12th in the NFL in rushing yards over expected per attempt. And why I bring up Bijan is because, we all offseason we have talked about the quarterback situation, the Falcons, and I feel like we've ignored Bijan Robinson a little bit.
So
Tyler Algier did get a lot of carries last year. Bijan was on the field for 70% of the snaps that he was eligible to be on, but I believe the rushing attempts, 214 for Bijan Robinson and 186 for Tyler Algier. I feel like that split should not be that close this year, where I think Bijan could be on the field. Let's maybe bump it up to 80% of the time, because you're not going to have a running back on the field for 90, 100% of the time. He needs time off. But I think the efficiency is just so clear, where Bijan was just so much better in yards per attempt. He was so much better in rushing yards over expected per attempt. That divide between rushing attempts should be much higher for Bijan Robinson this year, right?
Absolutely. And I think that was the most frustrating thing about Arthur Smith last year, is like there was just this commitment to Algier, even though he didn't have anywhere near the same year that he did as a rookie. But, I mean, you watch Bijan Robinson and the way he's able to make guys miss within structure, and then you add in the receiving game, like he should be a focal point of this offense. But you're also going to have to get Kyle Pitts. I don't even like calling Kyle Pitts a tight end. He's just a 6'6" slot wide receiver. He doesn't line up in line at all. I don't think Zach Robinson's going to ask him to do that, especially with the way the Rams value blocking with their skill players. But like I think all three of those guys, London, Pitts, and Bijan, are going to have significant jumps in their numbers. I mean, they were held back so much back by quarterback play last year. Like, it was god awful to watch that they had this limited offense for him, and he still was awful at running it.
Here's my thing, and I like Bijan a lot. I took him with my first fantasy pick last year, so that worked out not great. Worked out fine. How many running backs taken in the top 10 would you draft again in the top 10? Like, go back here recently. Saquon. I mean, he's been a good player.
The injuries screwed Saquon, and the Giants' lack of ability to draft good offensive linemen.
Okay, but that's right.
But
that's
the Falcons have a good
here.
offensive line.
Yeah, I think that's the main difference, because even if you want to go back to CMC with the Panthers, like, that was just a really bad situation, especially after Cam leaves and everything.
That's why you usually don't get him in the top 10, is because usually they're being put into bad situation. You don't want to put a running back into a bad offensive situation.
Now, I can't really remember that, the 2023 draft on the top of my head and where Bijan was taken, and maybe there was like a good pass rusher, right?
Yeah, Jalen Carter went the pick after. Now, I know there's off-field stuff.
All right, but even like leave that aside.
Okay, let's not leave it aside. Who would you rather have out of the next 10 picks? Jalen Carter, we'll leave him off because of off-the-field issues.
Yeah, give me the picks.
Darnell Wright, Peter Skoronski, Jahmyr Gibbs, Lucas Van Ness, Broderick Jones, Will McDonald, and Emmanuel Forbes. I mean, the first player that I would have picked over him is Christian Gonzalez, who went 17th.
Right. So I think
but what did we just talk about? We just talked about the Falcons' defense.
Oh, I agree. I would take Christian Gonzalez over Bijan. But now that he's on the team, at least he went to a team that has a good offensive structure and now has a quarterback.
Yes.
Right? Where if they didn't have that, it'd be like Saquon all over again.
Where I don't agree. I don't agree with drafting a running back in the first round. I don't agree with it. But if you're going to, you better damn hope that you have that offensive line in front of you and maybe some sort of stable quarterback situation, which the Falcons did eventually get, hopefully, with Kirk Cousins here, right? So I don't think there is an exception, but I can't, as a person on a podcast, I'm not just going to sit here and just, we'll shoo it away. It was a terrible pick, horrible pick, blah, blah, blah. He's here, and there is a path for Bijan Robinson to be really, really damn good and on a really, really good, possibly a really, really good offense, because there is a good structure around him.
All right, let's get to the Carolina Panthers, who, well, if they had played their cards right, they would have been back on the clock number one for the second straight year. Instead, Caleb Williams is now in Chicago.
Do you think Caleb Williams would even want to be drafted by Carolina? No. He would pull an Eli.
Yeah, probably. All right,
That's
so they
perfect
made
summer sports radio right there. Would Caleb Williams even went to the Panthers?
No, he wouldn't have.
They made massive, massive changes all over the place. Not only just personnel, but they've got another new head coach. Check back with me next year to see if I'm saying the same thing, although I think that Dave Canales will stick around for a while. Is it possible that the Carolina Panthers are pointed in the right direction? Now, I'm not talking about making a monumental leap to 8 wins. but does it feel, Justin, like they're pointed in the right direction?
They have the worst owner in the NFL, and that's going to just keep you from long-term success anytime.
Now, really, it's how are you going to help Bryce Young, and how are you going to put him in a situation that he could possibly succeed, right? They really did spend a ton of money on that offensive line. Bobby, what did they? So Robert Hunt, they spent a ton of money on.
Yeah, I have all the new additions.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
Like running back Jonathan Brooks, wide receiver Deontay Johnson, Xavier Legette, tight end Jatavion Sanders, O-line Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis, 2 big money guards. On the D-line, they added A'Shawn Robinson and Jadeveon Clowney, added Josie Jewell at linebacker, and then Dane Jackson and Jordan Fuller in the DB room. Now they lost Brian Burns, Von Bell, Frankie Louvu and Jeremy Chin and Grossman Toast. We don't really like that much around here.
But that's not a good defense. That's a bad defense.
Yeah, it's a bad defense, and
Really
I don't
bad.
think I know Clowney's coming off probably his best efficiency year in the NFL. I'm not expecting.
It's different in Carolina.
I'm not expecting for a full repeat of that. It's just is Bryce Young good, right? Like I think that's the biggest thing with them is Bryce Young good, and there are other early picks, right? Like they need Ikem Ekwonu, who I think could be in line for a year 3 jump. They need him to step up. They need J.C. Horn, who's been phenomenal when he's on the field, to stay on the field, who they picked up as 5th-year option. You need your second-round wide receiver in Jonathan Mingo a year ago to step up and be a solid player. But I think Deontay Johnson is the best thing they did for Bryce Young this offseason. Obviously, the offensive line guys help, but having Deontay Johnson outside, to go with Adam Thielen in the slot, I think can be a nice little safety blanket for him to get quick passes off to.
And he mentioned Deontay Johnson. He's like, I'm paying attention to what guys are getting paid. And he knows that if he can do anything down in Carolina, that he's going to get paid, whether it's by the Panthers or somebody else. So this is a big year for him, I think.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see, how does that offense work with Dave Canales, right? Like, this is a much worse offensive situation than Tampa was. But if you can get them to, the 20th offense in the NFL and Bryce Young is, a big reason for that, I think you can feel good about coaching staff. It's just, I don't like the way that they drafted, and I think that, again, I think they have the worst owner in sports. Which I think, and he just got the team, and I think that just we saw with Washington. It's just hard to have any long-term success when you have that, and they have that in Dave Tepper. And again, who was their best player last year? Was it Brian Burns?
He was one of them. Their defense was actually top 5. People may not have noticed because we were all staring at how ugly the car accident
And they
was.
kept their defensive coordinator, who's good too, but.
So here's the deal. You mentioned it all comes down to really Bryce Young. At what point do people start turning on him? Is it a month into the season with a new coaching staff and so many new players on that side of the football?
Yep.
We have to give him some time to grow, but you know how people get. They're going to be
he has
all right.
this year for Carolina, right?
Yeah, he has.
But if it looks bad a month in, I don't think from the outside in you have any hope for him. But he's going to get the year regardless, as long as he stays healthy.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be sitting here, seeing what they did this offseason. And now that Dave Canales is the head coach, you have Brad Idzik, who's the offensive coordinator. I really don't think we're going to be sitting here fully saying the situation is why Bryce Young didn't succeed, unless some of these guys on the offensive line underperform. They invested so much money in the interior, like we said. Ikem Ekwonu, if you take that year 3 step up. Adam Thielen was clearly this security blanket for Bryce Young last year. And, I don't think he's great, but he got all that volume and he was solid. We talked about Deontay Johnson. And in my brain, it's kind of like a Jonathan Mingo versus Xavier Legette kind of battle. And I hope Jonathan Mingo gets a good amount of run. But I don't think we're sitting here. Their tight end room's not great. But I don't think I'm not sitting here saying right now, man, Bryce Young is set up for failure heading into 2024.
Last year, the numbers weren't bad. They were disastrous. They were bottom 5 in total offense, where they were last, scoring, where they were tied for last, passing offense where they were last, yards per play where they were last, big plays where they were 29th, sacks tied for 30th, third down where they were 27th. They were middle of the road in turnovers and red zone. That is an atrocious offensive resume right there. Like, what's going to happen? We all feel like they're going to be the worst team in the league. Did we all vote them 32?
Yeah, post-draft.
Yeah,
close.
I did. And here's the thing, like Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis are like, they're good guards. I don't know if they're transforming that offensive line. Like, they need to, like, if Ikem Ekwonu needs to be good for that offensive line to be good.
So, but my question is this. If they do get 2 wins again this year or 3, but they are on the clock next year, aren't we all going to be talking about how they need a quarterback?
Oh, if he looks bad this year, they should be looking for their next quarterback. Now, they may not be in a situation to do that. But yeah, if they have the first pick, do they even have their pick next year? I don't think they do they?
Oh, I think they do.
I hope so.
For goodness sakes, they couldn't have given 3 away.
And DJ Moore.
Yeah,
Come
again,
on.
just like that trade was tagging DJ Moore into that trade. Okay, so they have their first round pick. But yeah, if there's a QB that we all view as like a first overall worthy quarterback and they're first on the clock, yeah. If Bryce Young is bad, they shouldn't, hold on and just hope for a year 3 turnaround.
All
it's
right,
hard to
before
succeed at that size, and especially behind a bad offensive line.
Oh, we know
And
that.
I'm not convinced that Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis are just taking this offensive line to a new level either. I think it'll help, and specifically in the run game with those 2 guys, which their run game was so awful last year. But they drafted a running back come off a torn ACL in the second round, Jonathan Brooks. Like, I just don't. I think they're gonna have to force feed Deontay Johnson and quick passes to try and survive this year.
All right, before we get out of here, let's give our divisional predictions. Penik?
I have the Falcons 1, Bucks 2, Saints 3, and Panthers 4.
Falcons 1, Saints 2, Bucks 3, Panthers 4.
I'll follow Justin Penik. He and I are walking the same plank.
Yeah.
Let's go. Give us some exciting football, NFC South. We are testing you.
Falcons have, I think, back-to-back weeks. I think they are playing the Eagles and the Chiefs early on in the season, and I think both of those games are primetime.
Weeks 2 and 3. Yep. At Philly, I think it's like a Thursday nighter, maybe. And then the next week against Kansas City Chiefs.
Thursday night
All
football. Falcons Eagles, man. It feels like, Matt Ryan versus Carson Wentz going on. That felt like that was a Thursday night matchup every year.
Well, now we get that in the Colts alumni game. So if you ever are looking forward to that.
There we go.
All right, boys, we are back at it again later this week. Maybe they take a 6-week break in the NFL. We do not do that around here at Football Day today. So for Justin Penik and Bobby Skinner and our man Mikey, who's putting this show all together, I am Chris Rose. We will see you Friday on Football Today.